Welcome to the EdjSports NFL Podcast. I'm your host, Ian O'Connor, Senior Data Analyst here at EdjSports. And with me, as he is every week, is my co-host, Scott Brown, our VP of Data Science here at EdjSports. Scott, we had a pretty fun weekend of action. What stood out to you the most from either Thursday or Sunday night?
Yeah, that game last night really did not disappoint between Baltimore and Kansas City. Loved the way it ended. It ended fittingly, I think, with Harbaugh keeping the offense on the field on 4th and 1 in a big moment. Lamar picks up the first down, and they're finally able to get over the hump against Kansas City. It was a wonderful game to watch, really exciting, and yeah, that was the big takeaway for me this week.
Yeah, awesome that the way we said, like we were talking here before, that the league has kind of gone where more coaches than in the past probably would have gone for it there, but still might not see a lot of coaches go for it there. So before we dive into recapping everything, though, the biggest plays from week 2 and some of the most impactful plays, like last week, just want to remind everyone that we'll have our show available for you on Monday throughout the NFL season. Also, be sure to check out our all-new website and experience at EdjSports.com. That is EdjSports.com. And download our new app. It's available for both iOS and Android. You can get pregame betting insights for every NFL game this season, as well as our fair value, and you'll have the ability to track your bets to see the probability of them hitting in real time, which is a really awesome feature if you're watching those games or making live betting as well. So now let's dive into Week 2's action. So we started the week with another exciting finish on Thursday Night Football. In Week 1, it was that ending in Dallas and Tampa Bay with the Cowboys getting that field goal late and the Buccaneers coming down, Tom Brady doing what he does and setting the Buccaneers up for that game-winning field goal. Now, Thursday night this week was not necessarily a good game, but it was a good finish and an entertaining game. Coach Rivera for Washington did have one of our best play calls of the week coming in the second quarter. He went for it on 4th and 1 from the Giants' 39-yard line instead of kicking a field goal. They were trailing 7-0 at the time. This was the correct decision as it added 5% in win probability prior to the snap, and they converted on that play as well. Then we saw later in the game it was the third most impactful play of the week. Coming on Thursday night, it stuck in there in the top 5. Came in the fourth quarter with 2:22. Those of you that watched this game or even saw the highlights probably remember when Taylor Heineke threw the pass that was intercepted by the Giants that cost him 46.3% win probability. It was a devastating blow at the time. The Giants kicked the field goal to take the lead, but as we know, Washington went down and got actually 2 cracks at that field goal there at the end of the game, which we'll cover a little bit later on. But they were able to hold off the Giants for the win. Scott, was there anything in this game that you wanted to add there? I know, like I said, it wasn't necessarily a good game. There were only kind of these couple decisions, and the ending was exciting.
Yeah, I just think it's good to see Riverboat Ron continue to live up to the namesake. He, not afraid to pull the trigger in an important moment. As you mentioned, this game, I think we don't really have high aspirations for either of these teams as we look out over the rest of the season. Although, if you're a fan of these teams, you might feel differently. But if you're a Washington fan, good to see your head coach willing to put it on the line when it matters most. And yeah, Riverboat Ron continues to do his thing.
Yeah, and it's awesome to see Taylor Heineke doing well. He came in, started for them in the playoff game last year against the Bucs, took them pretty much to the brink there. Had a great game, had another great game tonight in his, I think they said it was his 3rd career NFL start. A guy that was taking some kind of classes last year before Washington picked him up sometime in the season. Now, so that game was Thursday. Some of you, it's probably not at the top of your mind, but one game that is at the top of everyone's mind today is last night's phenomenal game between Kansas City and Baltimore. Basically, the AFC heavyweight bout between these two teams did not disappoint at all. Now, this game ended up being an easy over, covered that by about midway through the third quarter as Lamar Jackson and Patrick Mahomes just traded blows going back and forth on offense. There really wasn't a ton of defense until the end, which we'll get to. But it had a number of highlight plays for us here in our top 5s at Edge Sports. There were 2 key plays that stood out in those top 5s. The first, one of them was down by 1. Like I said, the defense coming up big here with 1:24 remaining in the fourth quarter. The Chiefs' Clyde Edwards-Helaire fumbled the ball, losing possession to the Ravens. They were going down, getting ready to set up for a game-winning field goal attempt for Harrison Butker. Lost the ball. The Ravens recovered. Obviously huge as it cost Kansas City almost 71% of their win probability at 70.7% was the second most impactful play of the week. And then with the ball back, Baltimore looked to use up all the clock basically, but as much as possible. Then they got stopped on 4th and 1. And I'm sure you all know exactly where we're going here. 1:05 remaining in the game. John Harbaugh made a phenomenal call, gutsy call, correct call to go for it on 4th and 1 at their own 43, leading by only 1 point. and that increased their pre-snap win probability by 16.4%. Scott, like we said, more coaches than in the past probably would go for it here, but there probably are not a lot that would go here. Once they converted, it was over. Easily best decision, fourth down go of week 2 and of the season. What did you think about that decision? I'm sure you were up watching that one.
Yeah, I mean, it was a slam dunk. And I think we've come to expect this now from Harbaugh. He has a knack for making these decisions, for making the right call at the right time. As you mentioned, I think it's impossible to know, but I think a lot of coaches throughout the league, and we saw this in the Minnesota-Arizona game, are still kind of behind the times, right? They're still unwilling to make the aggressive call here and keep the offense on the field, even though they have the lead. And, it's just the right move, especially in this case when you only have to pick up a yard. You're a heavy favorite to pick it up. And especially when you have an offense like Baltimore's that can run, those sort of quarterback keeper type plays with a dynamic athlete like Lamar, just really, really works out well for Baltimore. Another thing to consider here, you're playing against perhaps the best team in the league, Kansas City. You really don't want to give their offense the ball with a chance to beat you here at the end. So, I mean, crowding them out of possession, keeping it away from them, just really, really makes this, wind at the back to make this decision. Not to dwell on it, but as you sort of alluded to, that fumble by Hilaire is just an absolute backbreaker. That really cost them. Don't want to dwell on it. I'm sure he feels terrible about it. Just doing everything he can there. But I mean, Baltimore barely escapes, with the win. Had it not been for that particular play, I think it's a completely different story. But given the opportunity, they capitalized on it, and the rest is history. So that was my general takeaway from this game. And did anything from it stand out to you, Ian, or anything that was interesting from it?
Just it was a very exciting game. The way it seemed like Baltimore got down, I think it was 11 points a couple times, and it kind of looked like it was over. Travis Kelce had that awesome touchdown catch and run. I think it was Demarcus Robinson had the other one on the drive right before that, where it was they kind of caught the ball in the middle of the field, had some open field, had some blockers, and kind of just circled around and went past everyone there. One interesting thing to note is this game we actually did have Baltimore. It was a pick 'em, but we had Baltimore as slight favorites, and they came through for us, so that was pretty awesome to see there as well. And then just talking about John Harbaugh, how him and Andy Reid are just two of the more analytically sound coaches in the league. They're constantly near the top of our coach rankings. John Harbaugh actually was our coach of the year 2 years ago, I believe, and Andy Reid I think came in second 2 years in a row, or second and third, but he's always up there. They didn't really have a ton. The Chiefs didn't of fourth down really situations. It seemed like they stayed out of fourth downs unless it was a fourth and long where there was a sack or something where they really had no choice but to punt. Yeah,
that drive where they at the end where they fumbled to, who knows what might have come up there. Had they held onto the ball, maybe they would have faced an interesting decision. Yeah, a lot of interesting parallels in this game. I mean, you have two former NFL MVPs at quarterback. You have two just dynamic athletes. You saw in that game too, like just some of the plays they were able to make with their feet to prolong the play, throw the ball downfield. There was, I think, one play that stood out to me was a Lamar Jackson jump pass to Hollywood Brown. Incredible. Like, I don't know how that guy does it. Just unreal being able to make that sort of play happen.
And not only was it a jump pass, you kind of think of Tim Tebow back in Florida. His were usually at the goal line where you throw it, 5 yards. Lamar, I think, threw that ball about 25 yards down the field. A pretty good spiral on that, too. And then Hollywood Brown just had green grass behind him and just took off.
Yeah, I think, another thing about this game, if you would have told me that Kansas City would have been held off the scoreboard the entire fourth quarter, I would have called you crazy. Coming out in that second half, they just marched down the field 2 times in a row, no resistance whatsoever. As you mentioned, over was a slam dunk to hit, by then. To keep them off the scoreboard the entire fourth quarter, big props to the Baltimore defense. Obviously that turnover, was big at the end to keep it scoreless there. But really, really great game this week, and look forward to hopefully another one here in the weeks to come.
Yeah, and it was awesome to see too the way Lamar started off the game with the pick 6 and just looked like he was struggling a little bit early, and to come back pretty much put the team on his back the rest of the game. I think I saw it was his 4th game with 200-plus passing yards, 100-plus rushing yards, most in NFL history. So that guy just does it all, and I swear he is probably the most elusive player I've ever seen on a football field, if not any player quarterback. The way he just stops on a dime, will do it 3 times in 4 steps and just make guys miss is insane. Always fun to watch. And then as we know, Mahomes has just an awesome arm, is able to keep plays alive. So yeah, we could talk about this game pretty much all day, but we'll move on now to our top 5, starting with our most impactful plays now that we've got those storylines out of the way. So again, these are the plays that had the most impact on the game in terms of win probability, either positive or negative, and we always talk about these from the offensive standpoint. So starting with number 5, we had the Colts versus the Rams in the 4th quarter. This was a big one. Colts were down 3, trying to stage a comeback. Had Jacob Eason at quarterback after Carson Wentz suffered an injury, which we now know looks like it's both of his ankles. That guy seems to have some injury struggles every time he gets on the field. So, but this one was 2nd and 10 for Indy at their own 25. Pass intercepted by the Rams. And that pretty much did it. The Colts got the ball back. That ended up getting the ball back, but couldn't do anything with it. Obviously, the Rams won, but this interception cost them 26.5% win probability. Dropped them down below 1% at that point. Said it was 2 minutes, just over 2 minutes left in the game. Colts had no timeout, so the Rams just ended up having to punt it back, but didn't leave the Colts much time there.
Yeah, as you mentioned, then the Colts had no timeouts, so this was basically all their equity in the game when that ball gets turned over there. Tough way to unfortunately have to go down without your best, perhaps your best player on the team, your starting quarterback in there at the end. Hopefully Carson Wentz is able to shake off whatever's ailing him and come back for a productive season ahead. But we'll have to keep our eyes out on that quarterback situation.
And checking in at number 4, this is a game we're going to see a lot of. Well, we've got a couple plays from this game in our most impactful plays. Not surprisingly, none in our best decisions, but worst decisions. We will definitely cover this game in depth. But it comes from the Minnesota-Arizona game, which the first half seemed like it was going to be 50-50 coming down, whoever had the ball last. Ended up being a minute 21 left. Vikings were down 34-33. Had 3rd and 10 just across midfield at the Arizona 48. Kirk Cousins hits his man. I think it was Adam Thielen on this play, as it seems like it always is when they need a big play. Got down to the Arizona 36, getting them into field goal range with a little over a minute left. This increased their win probability to 26.8%. They were just slight favorites to win the game at this point at 51% prior to this play. Said it was a 3rd and long. They were going to have to go for it. No matter, I guess they wouldn't have had to go for it if they got down to a 4th and 1, knowing Zimmer, as we're kind of alluding to the future coming up, he may have attempted a long field goal there. But yeah, not really a ton to this one, not exciting, just a 3rd down conversion late in the game. Anything you want to add on this one or from that game this time?
Yeah, I mean, it was a big play. It was an absolutely huge play here. There's some foreshadowing as well as we get to our number 1 play in the most notable plays this week. But as you mentioned, sets them up for field goal range. What eventually becomes kind of a chip shot field goal, but we'll get to that in a second. And yeah, just when you need it most on 3rd and 10, Adam Thielen, Kirk Cousins come up big here by finding a gain of 12 yards, and also importantly, he's able to get out of bounds there, stop the clock. So to conserve a timeout there is really big at the end, and that's really the highlights of that one.
On number 3 and number 2, we'll cover these pretty quickly, just run through them. We covered these in our highlights just a few moments ago. Number 3 was Washington leading by 1 against the Giants. Had 2nd and 7 at their own 22. This was the pass that was intercepted by the Giants at Taylor Heineke's. That cost the Washington football team 46.3%, as we mentioned, number 3. Number 2 is from last night's game, the Chiefs trailing by 1. We talked about it, the fumble by Clyde Edwards-Helaire, 2nd and 3 at the Baltimore 32, getting set up, if not to get a first down, to get them even closer, even on the next play, that 3rd down. He fumbles behind the line. Baltimore recovers. We talked about what happened next. That one was a 71% decrease in win probability for the Chiefs, and they ended up losing that game. Moving on to number 1. So we've got a ton to talk about in this game. This is the biggest play of the week, biggest play of the season as far as win probability change. The Vikings down 1, 4 seconds left, last play of the game. Got a game-winning field goal attempt just about 4 yards longer than an extra point. And they miss it. A 90.1% chance before that kick.
Yeah, I mean, NFL kickers, very proficient. They continue to get better and better all the time. This is a pressure-packed moment, down 1, you're in chip shot field goal range. There's only 4 seconds left on the clock, so this is the final play. Really, no surprise to anybody here that if you miss this field goal, it's going to show up on this list, right? It's number 1 this week. It has a good shot of staying high on the list throughout the course of the season. You feel for Greg Joseph. We'll see what happens in Minnesota with regard to any possible kicking changes. But yeah, really feel for him and the special teams unit on this play. If you're a Minnesota fan, it hurts, and not to highlight this for those in the know as Minnesota fans, but just missed field goals sort of haunting that fan base over their history. It's unfortunate that yet again here in week 2 of the 2021 regular season, it crops up again. Different names, but same story.
Yep. You pretty much read my mind. I'm going to throw the name out there. As a Packers fan, I'm going to bring up some nightmares for the Vikings, but Blair Walsh against Seattle, much closer field goal, much higher circumstances, or much larger circumstances, but still it's not a good feeling for the Vikings now. We said we'll get to it. Coaching was a big topic in this game, but had a chance to get their first win of the season and now fall to 0-2, although in that NFC North, could be the NFC.
Still
the way
alive.
it started could be the NFC East of this year, where a team with 7 or 8 wins. Although we expect the Packers to get back on track there. But yeah, 90.1% decrease. And you mentioned, anytime you miss a kick at the end of the game, you're going to end up on this list. It is want to note that number 2 we mentioned, the Chiefs fumble, was the largest non-kicking play of the week and largest non-kicking GWC change of the season as well at 70.7%. So that'll wrap up the most impactful plays of the week. If you're interested in seeing more with these plays, be sure to check out our top 5 section on EdjSports.com. You can follow us on social media at EdjSports to see more breakdowns of these plays, not only from this week, last week, and future weeks to come. So let's change gears slightly now, Scott, and talk about our top 5 best decisions from the weekend games. So these are decisions that coaches made that had the most positive impact on the game in terms of win probability prior to the snap. And these are going to be our what we call critical calls, which are 4th downs, point after attempts, kickoff, onside kick, those types of things. So it's not a should have run the ball instead of passing it, should have put this player in, just at the point of decision, deciding whether to go for it, whether to kick or not. So starting at number 5, we've got the Bucs and the Falcons. So this one was 4th and 1 for Tampa Bay at their own 41. This was after the Falcons had kind of staged, not really a furious comeback, but being down pretty big in this game and being heavy underdogs. They came back to cut it to 28-25. Tampa, again, had 4th and 1 at their own 41. Last play of the 3rd quarter with about 30 seconds left. This decision increased their pre-snap win probability by 4.7%. They converted this. It took them from 81.7 to 84.6. If they would have not converted, if they would have failed at the line of scrimmage, they would have dropped down to 69.6. So still would have been favorites. Not a huge increase on the conversion of 81. I know we typically cover kind of some pre-snap, but this is an important distinction, I think, to make, Scott. Sometimes you'll see on a 4th and 1, a team, they convert, but they only gain another 2% win probability. You want to talk through why that is?
Well,
just for people to know that.
Yeah, I mean, I think here it just becomes sort of necessary to go for it, right? You're sort of in a high scoring back and forth game, and for the Buccaneers, to just leave Tom Brady on the field and go for it, I think is definitely the right call. It's good to see Arians kind of get in the mix and put his name on the list of best 4th down decisions.
It's kind of hit or miss sometimes.
Yeah, hit or miss for sure. And so it's good to see that there is a situation that can come up in a game where he's willing to go for it. So that's good. I mean, when you're Tampa Bay, sometimes you can be indifferent with that solid defense and then obviously their high-powered offense. But, yeah, here I think right thing to do, hold on to the ball, continue to go down the field. And, they're eventually able to hold on in this one. I think it was, good to see Arians make a good decision for once.
Yeah, and that said that on a 4th and short, the probability of conversion is pretty high, so that's kind of baked in to the decision or the change in win probability there. And like you said, Arians, we talked about it, he can show up as 2 or 3 of our top 5 worst decisions, and he could show up with 2 or 3 of our best decisions, sometimes in the same week. You just kind of never really know with him, but good to see him get on there and not kind of cower there and say, you know what, I'm going to trust my top defense, although they probably still would have been all right if they punted, but good to see that.
Yeah, and sorry, I missed that a moment ago, but yeah, you're right. So, a lot of people don't maybe have a good sense of like how likely, a strong NFL offense is to pick up a 4th and 1 situation. And it's quite high. I mean, this number can be easily north of 50%, as high as like 70 or perhaps even more, especially if the matchup is favorable, right? And when you have that Tampa Bay offense as strong as they are, it's hard to guard everybody. You have Tom Brady, who's very proficient in that West Coast short passing offense, so that's like a good check, right? You have to be able to guard the pass and the run. And then like another thing to consider is in some of these situations, you have 4th and real short, like real short. So it shows up as 4th and 1 here on our box score, but it's really inches in some cases or a foot, and then the quarterback sneak becomes a threat, right? So it's,
especially with Brady.
Yeah, especially with Brady, we've seen it over and over again throughout his career. So I think if you're Arians, even though he's more hesitant here, you got to feel good about pulling the trigger. And good to see that he did it. And as you mentioned, sometimes the jump you get is not as much as you'd expect, but that's mainly because the conversion rate is so high.
Yep. So going on to number 4, we've got the Colts and Rams. This was the opening drive of the game. The Colts took about 7 minutes off the clock here and had 1st and goal at the 1. Took it all the way to 4th and goal at the 1. LA had 3 straight stops. The Colts decided to go for it. Frank Reich, no surprise that he went for it. Really, any coach these days, I feel like 4th and goal at the 1, unless it's very late in the game and all you need is a field goal to win. I think 9 times out of 10 coaches are gonna go for it here. But this one increased, and this is kind of surprising to see. The first drive of the game was a 4.8% increase, and that just kind of lends itself to that, talking about how 4th and goal at the 1, you go for it. I mean, the resulting field position is an advantage for you, even if you don't get it. In this situation, Wentz was sacked at the LA 10, so it gave them a little breathing room, but still, they've got 90 yards to go, so more often than not, you're going to benefit there.
Yeah, good to see Frank Reich do his thing. He's another coach that constantly rises to the top of these lists that we see and we put together. Yeah, and it's the right move. Even though it's early in the game, first quarter, there's no score or anything like that. Still the right move. Touchdowns are big. Get on the, try to get on the board. Another aspect of this decision is even if you fail, which they did here, you've really pinned your opponent deep in their own territory. I mean, in this case, it's less true because Wentz got sacked for 9 yards. But in a lot of cases, you set up a really tough spot for your opponent where they're gonna tend to be more hesitant in calling their offensive plays, trying to get some space from so close to their own goal line. The safety becomes a threat, right? So it really, it can really work out in a variety of ways. One other thing to add here is that, the Colts are slight dogs in this game, or actually, meaningful dogs in this game. So that once again is wind at the back of making the aggressive play call, right? So as the underdog, you want to seek out higher variance to get a little nerdy for a second. And going for it here, going for the 7 instead of taking the lower variance, 3-point outcome is really, really a good move from a long-term perspective on trying to win this game. If you're playing to win, then going for it here is the right move.
Yep, and that one coming down to the end of the game, just needed a field goal. So some people could say if they would have taken that field goal, it would have been a tie game, but you don't know how the rest of the game plays. Exactly, like you don't know. The Rams and Colts probably would have played that game at the end of the 4th quarter of that game differently had the Colts had 3 more points. So moving on to number 3 is one we talked about at the top. The Washington football team against the Giants, down 7-0 early in the game. The start of the second quarter, went for it. This increased their win probability prior to the snap by 5%. Taylor Heineke ended up getting 2 yards on this one, taking them up. This is another one only about 1.7, less than 2% increase, just because, especially against that Giants defense, that Washington team, without Fitzpatrick, still a decent offense there. They've got some playmakers in McLaurin and Gibson, and now Heineke, who seems to be a pretty good quarterback there. So that one at number 3 again was a 5% increase prior to the snap. Coming down to number 2, this is one we saw the opposite. So I'll start with the Raiders. We've got John Gruden down 1, 7-6, and coming down to the end of the second quarter, facing 4th and 1 at the Pittsburgh 8. A lot of times you might see a coach, especially coming up on halftime, just kick the field goal, take a 9-7 lead. try and get into halftime about a minute and a half later. Gruden goes for it, increasing their pre-snap win probability by 5.3%, and they converted this one. Had a couple interesting decisions in this game. One of them we'll get to later on the other side with Mike Tomlin. But what do you think about this one? Like, we've got John Gruden again. It seems like he's come around the last couple of years.
Yeah, he's coming around. I remember mentioning this on our last show. It'd be interesting to see how Gruden behaves moving forward, and here he comes through in an important spot. So he, props to him here for making the right call. It is a 4th and 1, so we don't want to get too carried away. But in the second quarter with about a minute and a half left, deep in your opponent's territory, it's not clear that every coach would be able to recognize that this is a go, and so worked out for them in this case. But yeah, good to see Gruden make the right call here. Sort of a nice little aspect of this decision here, as they're on the 8-yard line facing 4th and 1. When they pick up that first down, there's still some room to go, right? So they still have a little bit of room where they can run plays, continue to take time off the clock. So a nice aspect of this decision is not only do you get to realize more expected points by going for it here, but you also get to deny your opponent possession in a lot of cases. So, with the Steelers having 2 timeouts, they may be able to stop the clock a couple times, but you can really burn some clock in the process, and maybe even go on to score a touchdown in the best case. So those are just a few other aspects worth highlighting here that help make this decision a go.
Yep, and they did exactly that. They took the clock down, ended up had some penalties. They ended up kicking a field goal on 3rd and goal from the Pittsburgh 22. So ended up getting backed up, but still took the clock down, got a field goal, and then they got the ball to start the second half. So it's always good to try and get that double dip there at the end of the first and beginning of the second half. Moving on to number 1, we talked about this at the top again. It's John Harbaugh here with that 4th and 1 decision at his own 43. Again, that was an increase of 16.4%. Took them up to 100%, 99.9%. I guess there's still a chance they could have lost. Very, very, very slight chance. But is there anything you want to add on this one? Because I know we've kind of beat this one pretty good.
No, yeah. We've really, really touched on it. I think, once again, just good to see Harbaugh back, clear-headed, making these calls, and yeah, give the ball to Lamar Jackson, let him make a play, and do everything you can to keep Patrick Mahomes from showing up back on the field. They can't beat you if they don't ever have the ball, right? And exactly. You have the lead, so that's it.
Yeah, and that'll wrap up our best decisions of the week. Again, if you're interested in seeing more with these plays, be sure to check out our top 5 section on EdjSports.com, as well as on social media at EdjSports. Now, Scott, we get the fun part. The good decisions are out of the way. Let's get to some criticism. Let's wrap up the weekend review with a look at the top 5 worst decisions from the weekend's action. A lot of these come from the same game. I think we've got 2 games on this list, and that's it. So these are decisions that coaches made that had the most negative impact on the game in terms of win probability prior to the snap. So at the point of decision on those critical calls. Starting with number 5, we've got the Vikings and the Cardinals. This is going to be a theme here. Vikings up 20-14. 4th and 1 at their own 34. Second quarter, just under 2 minutes left. They choose to punt the ball. Cost them 4.7% in pre-snap win probability. Do you want to start with this one? I know you've got some takes on this.
Maybe we should just keep it rolling for the most part through this segment. I'm going to petition to rename our worst play calling segment a tribute to Mike Zimmer this week, I think. Just not starting it off not so great. 4th and 1, even though you're back in your own territory, you got 4th and 1. You have an excellent offense. You got Dalvin Cook. You got those dynamic receivers, Thielen and Jefferson. You just have so many playmakers. Even in spite of having that good offense, this is still a go. And then importantly, in this particular case, 1:54 left, just on the other side of the 2-minute warning. Or just on the side closest to the end of the half, and going for it here has benefits apart from just improving your chances to score. Denying the other team possession, not to beat a dead horse over and over and over again, super important. They passed up on the opportunity to do so here, and we really think it was not a good move.
And even if you don't get it, that Arizona offense, there's a chance that if they're going to score, they could score pretty quickly, and you could still get the ball back. They could always run it down. try and deny possession to you. But.
Yeah. I mean, a good way to think about this, if you're a basketball fan, is the 2-for-1, right? So you'll see a lot of teams employ this strategy in basketball, where as the clock runs down to end a quarter, you often see the offense like almost run like a fast break type possession when it's not really necessary, because they're doing some mental math as they look at their shot clock and the game clock to realize, hey, if we go ahead and put up a shot really quickly, even if it's not the best shot in the world, we're going to get the last possession of the half, right? And there's benefit to doing that. The way this works out in that scenario is that you wind up in total having more possession than the other team over the course of the entire game. Mm-hmm. Possession in any sport typically is very, very important. You can't score if you don't have possession in most cases. Football is no different, and in football it becomes even more paramount because possessions are so scarce, right? So teams typically only have anywhere between 10, 11, 12, maybe a few more than that possessions in a game. And so really maximizing every possession, and on the flip side of that is denying the value of possessions to your opponent, absolutely crucial. So in this particular case, that's an important aspect of this decision to consider. Mike Zimmer, unfortunately, not doing so, punting here, giving the Cardinals the ball back with basically the final possession in most cases of the quarter, of the half. Not a good move, and our model didn't think so either.
Yep, and a good note, like you mentioned on the possessions, how they are so scarce. Something I noticed yesterday, second half, looking at the play-by-play with Dallas and the Los Angeles Chargers, the second half play-by-play looked pretty scarce. There were only 6 total possessions in the whole second half. So that just, when you've got some teams like that can move the ball, which you've got in this situation, Minnesota and Arizona, they can take time off the play with some long drives. You get 9, 10, 11 play drives. You're going to take 5-6 minutes. We said in this situation, it was coming to the end of the second quarter. Arizona could still score quickly. They did that a lot. Both teams did that a lot in the first half. But just like you said, possession is just so important. So moving on to number 4, same game. We're going to flip sides, though. Cardinals up 34-33 with 2:21 left in the fourth quarter, facing a 4th and 9 at their own 40. So this is one that a lot of people may not agree with, probably won't. We're no stranger to having people disagree with some of these, but they're always defensible. The Arizona, Cliff Kingsbury, decided to punt. Again, 4th and 9 from his own 40, 2:21 left, leading by 1. This was a 4.9% decrease in pre-snap win probability. So, Scott, you want to talk through this one a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people are going to be shell shocked by the fact that we're recommending to go for it here on 4th and 9. I mean, I think an important thing to take stock of, though, is just all the other aspects of the game state here. So, the Cardinals are winning by 1. They only have a timeout, 1 timeout remaining for both teams, but there's only 2:21 left on the clock here in the fourth quarter, and they're on their own 40-yard line, right? So punting in a lot of these situations is not great because you're not really flipping the field position by much. In this case, it looks like they were able to shift it by close to the 40-ish yards, which is about average. But you're giving the Vikings the chance to go down the field, and basically the game is in their hands at that point to take the lead, and then also because there's so little time left on the clock, to take the lead and not give you a chance, right, to make it really a game-winning field goal type situation. It'd be easy to play results here and say, like, hey, that's what really happened. They were able to go down the field, set up what should have been a chip shot field goal. But, this decision became the right one to go for it even before any of that. And, your odds of converting aren't great. Your odds of converting, are definitely, like, you're a dog to do it, right? When you're that far away. But it still basically importantly gives you the opportunity to really, like, bleed the clock out when you get it. In a lot of cases, you may be even able to deny Minnesota from getting the ball back at all. And then there's also the aspect of if you turn over the ball on downs, you have a timeout to stop the clock. You have the 2-minute warning. You could realistically get the ball back with about a minute left and needing to score a touchdown if the Vikings if the Vikings are able to kick a field goal you still only need a field goal to win, right? So that's another important aspect of this decision. So, I think for those sorts of reasons running down the list, I think going forward here is a defensible move. Our model thinks so too. It works out to be about a 5% difference, and understandable how Kingsbury would miss this one. I think many coaches in the league would make a similar decision or make the same decision. I think our model is thinking ahead and disagrees.
Yep, and one thing to clarify on this too, or maybe not clarify, but just to make note of and make the listeners aware of is this. We haven't really covered this before either. When it comes to our errors, we've got our high confidence errors is what we call them. Maybe not the best term, but when we're looking at these errors, we account for the offense and defensive strengths. We know, it's the Cardinals. We know it's the Vikings. We know it's Cousins, Murray, their kickers, all that stuff. But what we also look at is if this were a situation where the Cardinals have the worst team in the league, the Vikings have the best team in the league, and then run it, and it's still a go, this is high confidence. So not even accounting, people will sometimes say, well, are you all accounting for the fact that it's Kyler Murray or Derrick Henry running the ball, this and that? We are, but even if it wasn't, even if it was a horrible team against the best team in the league, this is still going to be a go due to all the factors that you just mentioned, the timing, the timeouts, the score, and just the game state as a whole. So, and we'll see that coming up too here in the next couple. But moving on to number 3, this one, I don't know if you saw this one. I actually didn't catch it as it happened. It was brought up to me a little bit a few minutes later on, but the Steelers were down 9 points to the Raiders. It's 4th and 1 at their own 34. 8.5 minutes left in the fourth quarter. Again, they're down 9 points. That's 2 scores. Mike Tomlin chose to punt. I don't know what he was doing. I don't know if he just gave up and wanted to go home, had some plans that afternoon, just said, forget it. I don't know.
No idea what he's thinking.
This cost him 5.6% in win probability prior to the snap. They only had 13% if they went for it.
And thank you, Mike Tomlin, for giving us a detour to the Mike Zimmer tribute. This I have no idea. This to me seems so solidly a go. Down, as you mentioned, 9 points. That really is everything. And it's 4th and 1. 4th and 1. I understand you're on your own 34, so some coaches really are old school and don't like putting their defense in a bad spot or something. But if you are playing to win the game, you go for it here, and you're going to pick up the first down so many times. You gotta. Forget anybody's feelings. If you're playing to win, you gotta keep possession. You gotta prolong this drive and hopefully go down the field. At least put up a field goal. Ideally you're playing to win the game, and so you need to score a touchdown eventually. I really do not know. I think this one was glaringly obvious, and that's really all I have to say about that one.
Yeah, actually, I ran the numbers on this one for some stuff I was working on this morning, looking at just what their break even is, the risk reward there. They only needed to convert that 22.5% of the time. 1 out of 5, a little over 1 out of 5. The historical kind of 4th down conversion rate in that midfield area, I think between like the 35s, maybe the 40s, is close to 70%.
Right.
So that's just, like you said, a no-brainer. There's no reason they should not have gone for that there.
Trust your offense.
Yes. And that Pittsburgh offensive line isn't the best. It's actually their weak point this season, but the defense is very good. But still, you've got Ben Roethlisberger, some very talented wide receivers on the team. Najee Harris, your first-round running back pick, who you think the world of. If even with a bad line, if he can't pick up a yard, if you don't think your offense can pick up a yard, I don't know why you're playing.
Right.
But that's Mike Tomlin for you again, number 3, 5.6% decrease. Coming into number 2 and number 1, we're going to kind of combine these into one because, again, they're both Mike Zimmer. He's going to have 3 out of the top 5, including the top 2. So the first one, I guess number 2 was the Vikings down 1, 31-30. Both teams have all their timeouts. Another 4th and 1 at their own 40, so a little bit closer to midfield, about a little over halfway through the third quarter, and he punted this one again. Good for a loss of 5.8% win probability prior to the snap. And the number 1 was, again, trailing by 1, this time 34-33. Minnesota still does have all their timeouts. Arizona's got just 1 left. But 4th and 6 at the Minnesota 29, so at their own 29-yard line, 2:52 left in the fourth quarter. Again, chooses to punt. And this one cost him 12.4% in pre-snap win probability, which I believe is our largest of the year. It's only been 2 weeks. but I believe that's our largest error of the year. Yeah, last week the biggest was only 5.5. So I know we've kind of covered this some. Is there anything more you want to say on Zimmer here, especially that number one?
Yeah, I mean, this game, the way it played out, really lent to some situations that exposed some poor decision making. The Vikings down one here. All the decisions are highly leveraged, right? And so when a 4th and 1 crops its head up, even though it's like halfway through the third quarter, around middle of the field, easy go, should be going for it. He decides to punt. Feels bad. I don't really think there's much more to say about that one. In today's age of professional football, these offenses are so good. You convert these things at such a high rate. Leave the offense on the field and go for it. As you mentioned, maybe the more interesting decision is our number one play calling error, and that is the 4th and 6 from Minnesota's own 29 late in the fourth quarter. This one, and I think we could see some folks disagree on it. I can understand that. I think traditionally you would see a lot of coaches defend this decision to punt here by saying, we have 3 timeouts. We'll call all of our timeouts. Basically just assume that we're going to be able to stop Arizona and we're going to get the ball back, right?
Yep.
The problem is that doesn't always work out, right? You may never see the ball again. And in fact, Arizona has a great offense. There are many scenarios the way this game plays out where you never touch the ball again, right? And so when you do have a situation like this, even though it's 4th and 6, keep your offense out there, have the courage to go for it, and give yourself the best chance to win the game. So when our model picks up and flags this play as being a really bad error, basically it's able to recognize the counterfactual, right? Recognize that there's a good chunk of the time that you're never getting the ball again, and you can't win in this game if you never get the ball again, right? So maximize the most, or maximize your possession right now. Go for it. Keep the offense on the field. Hopefully you're going to be picking up the first down most of the time. And when we look at the data, we do see that, you're right around 50-ish% to make it here, depending on the matchup. And we think that, especially with the Vikings offense here, they're more than capable. So it should be a go.
Yeah, an interesting note here is Mike Zimmer had 7 errors for a total loss of 28.7% win probability alone in this game from his decision. So you're looking at over a quarter of a win he lost, and it's interesting to note, I'm just kind of pulling some stuff up here while we're talking through this. Zimmer, after the game, talking about the field goal, said, they're indoors, good surface, fair distance, should be an easy one. The fact of the matter is it never should have come down to that, because those 4th and 1 decisions for Zimmer should have been easy ones, but he missed those. So his kicker missed 1 kick, he missed 7 decisions. So
right.
I think we know who's to blame there for real. So
easy to scapegoat the kicker, and you have to, as a coach, hopefully take the high road and look inward, right? What are the things you could have done to give your team a better chance to win?
Yeah, and it is interesting with kickers. You kind of feel bad for those guys sometimes, because it could, their team could mess up the whole game. Just like this Minnesota one, had so many chances to win that game, but it comes down to you. You're a professional kicker. You should make the kicks, but still, they take the blame. Like you said, they're the scapegoat when everything else went wrong that whole game. So we got some really good insight on those decisions. We're now wrap up our worst decisions of the week. Again, if you're interested in seeing more with those plays, be sure to check out our top 5 section on EdjSports.com and on social media at EdjSports. And don't forget to read this week's Risky Business column by Frank Frigo, one of our co-founders here at EdjSports, who highlighted the Sunday Night Football matchup, including 2 of the better analytical play callers in this game, as we mentioned, between John Harbaugh and Andy Reid, and covering that big 4th and 1 decision to close out the game last night. So we'll wrap up today's show by previewing the Monday Night Football matchup between the Lions and the Packers. We didn't get to do this last week. Obviously, we were a little delayed on Tuesday. So this is our first Monday Night Football preview coming on Monday morning. So, Scott, this one looks pretty easy on paper. Green Bay's favored in all 5 areas of the Advantage scoreboard, which you can find again on EdjSports.com and our EdjSports app. And they're projected to win 75% of the time straight up by our model. However, as we all know, last week the Packers laid a big egg against the Saints, who looked awesome. Packers looked out of sync. Saints looked awesome. Crashed way back down to earth this week against the Panthers. But meanwhile, the Lions were getting blown out. First half looked like it was over. They were about to pack up the buses and make the drive from Ford Field, the short drive to their homes. But they showed some fight late in the game. They made it close. They actually covered the closing 9.5-point line, losing by 8 points in that game. Had a chance to win it at the end as well, getting down to about the San Francisco 25-yard line. But what do you think about this matchup tonight overall? Is this an easy bet on Green Bay, or should we be a little bit wary? I'm not sure if we should expect Rodgers to come out like he did last year, like a man on fire wanting to prove everyone wrong, or if he's still kind of slumping from the offseason of doing whatever he did this offseason other than practice up in Green Bay.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of uncertainty that surrounds this game when you see Green Bay have that performance like they did in Week 1. So I'll be watching, with curiosity to see how this one plays out. I think you're also dealing with some uncertainty on the Detroit side as well, right? They're a very different team this year with Goff at quarterback as opposed to Stafford. That Week 1 performance looked really bad for a long time, and then they were able to kind of slide in at the end and make a game of it. As you mentioned, they were able to cover. So as we look out to this particular matchup, I'm looking for Detroit to perhaps cover the spread again. So the consensus right now looks to be about Detroit plus 12. Our model likes Detroit at that price, and we think a fairer price is actually closer to plus 8. So make no mistake, Green Bay is still a very heavy favorite in this game over a touchdown. But yeah, we think Detroit has what it takes here to perhaps keep this one closer than others expect. And for that reason, I think the smart side of this one is Detroit.
Yeah, and looking at the roster too, we've got some injuries. DeAndre Swift, running back for the Lions, has been beat up a little bit. The Packers obviously have David Bakhtiari, who's out on the physically unable to perform list. So he's got to miss at least 6 weeks. Green Bay's got a fullback out. Josiah DeGuara is out. Zadarius Smith was placed on IR. He played, it looked like, I think it was just on third downs last week. And then Darnell Savage, safety, looks like, based on our numbers, based on historical injury report data, based on his injury, from what we've pulled together in our injury model, it looks like he's got a 68% chance of playing, so 2/3. But so both teams are a little banged up early in the season, so it'll be interesting to see. But it seems like last week the 49ers ran all over the Lions. It seems like Aaron Jones always has great games. Even Devontae Adams last year, I think, just shredded them, though. So through the air, on the ground, it seems like Green Bay has just dominated Detroit for so long. But it's just a matter of how they come out tonight. Different season, different day, different game.
Yeah.
So we'll have to see.
Yeah, Aaron Rodgers, obviously elite, which makes that Week 1 performance even more of a head-scratcher. 3 points that dynamic offense put up. So
Mason Hitt made his loser league debut over our partners at Football Outsiders as one of the worst quarterbacks of the week.
Yeah, one last thing to note about this game, Ian, looking at the public money and where it lies, it looks like about 70% of the bets are on Green Bay, whereas closer to 60% of the money is on Detroit. Now, when these sorts of metrics disagree with one another, it sort of indicates that retail, which are typically putting down smaller-ish bets, are coming out in numbers to back Green Bay, while kind of the sharper side, the percentage of the money, comes out on Detroit's side. So it looks like in this case, our model sort of agrees with the sharper take, reading kind of the tea leaves here from the public money, which sort of would be some confirmation to back Detroit in this game.
Yep, and looking at the Sharp Rank as well, which we have on our site, which is an independent ranking system that helps fans kind of expose the Sharps rank that they know who to trust. These guys that are actually, you see people on social media all the time. Oh, I'm 75% against the spread, 100% straight up, vice versa, this and that, who to trust. And Sharp Rank is 79% on Green Bay, so they're actually a little bit heavier. We're at 75%, 25% for Detroit. Interesting to note, the consensus line of 11.5, 12, depending on where you look, has Detroit at only 19.7% chance to win straight up. Again, our number's 25, so there's a little bit of edge in the money line there. Although, like we mentioned a couple weeks ago, still a low probability event in our eyes. But you pay a little bit better price right now if you wanted to take a shot on Detroit to win that game. Anything else you want to mention from this game or anything from the weekend, Scott? I know we've covered a lot today. We got especially that Sunday night football game, Minnesota game, and looking at Monday night. Anything you want to add?
No, I mean, I think we went pretty in depth on all of it. Hopefully, Mike Zimmer is able to bounce back from a tough week. I know a lot of folks will be looking at their kicking situation closely. It's a common thing to see the kicking carousel play out in the NFL and have kickers kind of be roaming around team to team.
There's only a handful, or only one Justin Tucker, one Harrison Butker,
Yeah.
only one of those guys. So
Yeah.
Matt Prater had a big one. We didn't mention, but he had a 62-yarder. Detroit's probably missing him, but down in Arizona now.
Yeah, but hopefully, the coaches can evaluate their own decision making, right? Their own performance, and I think Mike Zimmer ought to do that this week. I think there's a lot of takeaways from that game, as we highlighted, and hopefully the Vikings are able to bounce back from that tough way to lose.
Yep. And one last note I do want to make on Zimmer. He had a bad game. I guess that's an understatement that he had a bad game, but it is fair to note last week we actually were on his side when he was getting hammered for doing the opposite thing in Seattle. I think they had a 4th and 1 down around inside the 10. I believe they were leading at the time. They could have kicked a field goal to go up. I think it was maybe 8. So it was early in the season last year. He went for it. They didn't get it. Seattle went down. They ended up winning the game. But he got hammered for that. So it's he's got kind of like an Arians. He's got his hit or miss, but this week he did very poorly, and like you said, hopefully he can kind of learn from that. Maybe give us a call. We'll sign up the Vikings to us, and we'll do some consulting for them as well. So that'll wrap up our Week 2 show, everybody. Be sure to check out all of our analysis from Week 2 on EdjSports.com and download the EdjSports app on both iOS or Android to get your betting preview for Monday Night Football. You can do some analysis there, kind of sifting through our distribution charts, looking at different outcomes, seeing what the percentages are associated with different spreads and different point totals for this game. And if you watched our betting preview video last week, you would have noticed a few of our picks hitting again this past weekend, including the Texans covering that large spread, about 13 points, and Baltimore winning straight up was one of our picks as well. We had it as a pick 'em, but as we mentioned, we had them as the slight favorites there. So stay tuned later this week for our pregame matchup videos for every single game, as we do every week, as well as our Week 3 betting preview coming on Thursday. Scott, thanks again for joining me, and we'll talk to you all later this week.
Thanks, Ian.